Today we read from the poetry of Louise Glück. Louise Glück, born in New York City in 1943, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2020. The books we are going to read from are her latest, Winter Recipes from the Collective 2021, and The Triumph of Achilles 1985. Louise Glück has the ability to look outwardly and see two figures in the landscape while also looking into her past and writing almost like a painter, detached and somewhat austere. She paints a picture with a story. It's not just what she sees and hears. Glück ends an endless story, quote, "The Chinese were right," she said, "to revere the old. Look at us," she said. "We are all of us in this room, still waiting to be transformed. This is why we search for love. We search for it all of our lives, even after we find it." Her Winter Recipes from the Collective is an elegant book told with sagacity, compassion, clarity, a love poem to her brave sister at the end of her life in an elderly care home. The magnificent readers in order of appearance are Corinne Conley, Kay Weissman, and Toni Sawyer. Here's Corinne Conley.
Poem. Day and night come hand in hand, like a boy and a girl, pausing only to eat wild berries out of a dish painted with pictures of birds. They climb the high ice-covered mountain, then they fly away. But you and I don't do such things. We climb the same mountain. I say a prayer for the wind to lift us, but it does no good. You hide your head so as not to see the end. Downward and downward and downward and downward is where the wind is taking us. I try to comfort you, but words are not the answer. I sing to you as mother sang to me. Your eyes are closed. We pass the boy and girl we saw at the beginning. Now they are standing on a wooden bridge. I can see their house behind them. "How fast you go," they call to us. But no, the wind is in our ears, and that is what we hear. But then we are simply falling, and the world goes by, all the worlds, each more beautiful than the last. I touch your cheek to protect you. The Denial of Death. I had lost my passport at an inn we stayed at for a night or so, whose name I couldn't remember. This is how it began. The next hotel would not receive me. A beautiful hotel in an orange grove with a view of the sea. How casually you accepted the room that would have been ours. And later, how merrily you stood on the balcony, pelting me with foil-wrapped chocolates. The next day, you resumed the journey we would have taken together. The concierge procured an old blanket for me. By day, I sat outside the kitchen. By night, I spread my blanket among the orange trees. Every day the same, except for the weather. After a time, the staff took pity on me. The busboy would bring me food from the evening meal, the odd potato and a bit of lamb. Sometimes a postcard arrived. On the front, glossy landmarks and works of art. Once, a mountain covered in snow. After a month or so, there was a postscript. X sends regards. I say a month, but really I had no idea of time. The busboy disappeared. There was a new busboy, then one more, I believe. From time to time, one would join me on my blanket. I loved those days, each one exactly like its predecessor. There were the stone steps we climbed together, and the little town where we breakfasted. Very far away, I could see the cove where we used to swim. But not hear anymore the children calling out to one another, nor hear you anymore, asking me if I would like a cold drink, which I always would. When the postcards stopped, I read the old ones again. I saw myself standing under the balcony in that rain of foil-covered kisses, unable to believe that you would abandon me, begging you, of course, though not in words. The concierge, I realized, had been standing beside me. Do not be sad, he said. You have begun your own journey, not into the world like your friends, but into yourself and your memories. As they fall away, perhaps you will attain that enviable emptiness into which all things flow, like the empty cup in the Tao Te Ching. Everything is change, he said, and everything is connected. Also, everything returns. But what returns is not what went away. We watched you walk away, down the stone steps and into the little town. I felt something true had been spoken, and though I would have preferred to have spoken it myself, I was glad at least to have heard it. Three, two, the story of the passport. It came back, but you did not come back. It happened as follows. One day, an envelope arrived bearing stamps from a small European republic. This the concierge handed me with an air of great ceremony. I tried to open it in the same spirit. Inside was my passport. There was my face, or what had been my face at some point, deep in the past, but I had parted ways with it. That smiling face with such conviction, filled with all the memories of our travels together and our dreams of other journeys. I threw it into the sea. It sank immediately, downward, downward, while I continued staring into the empty water. All this time, the concierge was watching me. Come, he said, taking my arm, and we began to walk around the lake, as was my daily habit. I see, he said, that you no longer wish to resume your former life. To move, that is, in a straight line, as time suggests we do, but rather, here he gestured toward the lake, in a circle which aspires to that stillness at the heart of things, though I prefer to think it also resembles a clock. Here he took out of his pocket the large watch that was always with him. I challenge you, he said, to tell, looking at this, if it is Monday or Tuesday. But if you look at the hand that holds it, you will realize I am not a young man anymore. My hair is silver. Nor will you be surprised to learn it was once dark, as yours must have been dark, and curly, I would say. Through this recital, we were both watching a group of children playing in the shallows, each body encircled by a rubber tube, red and blue, green and yellow, a rainbow of children splashing in the clear lake. I could hear the clock ticking, presumably alluding to the passage of time, while in fact, annulling it. You must ask yourself, he said, if you deceive yourself, by which I mean looking at the watch and not the hand holding it. We stood a while staring at the lake, each of us thinking our own thoughts. But isn't the life of the philosopher exactly as you describe, I said, going over the same course, waiting for truth to disclose itself? But you have stopped making things, he said, which is what the philosopher does. Remember when you kept what you called your travel journal? You used to read it to me. I remember it was filled with stories of every kind, mostly love stories and stories about loss, punctuated with fantastic details such as wouldn't occur to most of us. And yet hearing them, I had a sense I was listening to my own experience, but more beautifully related than I could ever have done. I felt you were talking to me or about me, though I never left your side. What was it called? A travel diary, I think you said, though I often called it the denial of death, after Ernest Becker. And you had an odd name for me, I remember. Concierge, I said. Concierge is what I called you. And before that, you, which is, I believe, a convention in fiction. Winter Journey. Well, it was just as I thought, the path all but obliterated. We had moved then from the first to the second stage, from the dream to the proposition. And look, here is the line between, resembling this line from which our words emerge. Moonlight breaks through, shadows on the snow, cast by pine trees. Say goodbye to standing up, my sister said. We were sitting on our favorite bench outside the common room, having a glass of gin without ice. Looked a lot like water, so the nurses smiled at you as they passed, pleased with how hydrated you were becoming. Inside the common room, the advanced cases were watching television under a sign that said, "Welcome to happy hour." If you can't read, my sister said, can you be happy? We were having a fine old time getting old. Everything hunky-dory, as the nurses said. Though you could tell snow was beginning to fall. Not fall exactly, more like weave from side to side, sliding around in the sky. Now we are home, my mother said. Before, we were at Aunt Posey's, and between in the car, the Pontiac, driving from Hewlett to Woodmere. You children, my mother said, must sleep as much as possible. Lights were shining in the trees. Those are the stars, my mother said. Then I was in my bed. How could the stars be there when there were no trees? On the ceiling, silly. That's where they were. I must say, I was very tired walking along the road. Very tired. I put my hat on a snowbank. Even then, I was not light enough, my body a burden to me. Along the path, there were things that had died along the way. Lumps of snow, that's what they were. The wind blew. Nights, I could see shadows of the pines. The moon was that bright. Every hour or so, my friend turned to wave at me. Or I believe she did, though the dark obscured her. Still, her presence sustained me. Some of you will know what I mean. An endless story. 1. Halfway through the sentence, she fell asleep. She'd been telling some sort of fable concerning a young girl who wakens one morning as a bird. "So like life," said the person next to me. "I wonder," he went on, "do you suppose our friend here plans to fly away when she wakens?" The room was very quiet. We were both studying her. In fact, everyone in the room was studying her. To me, she seemed as before, though her head was slumped on her chest. Still, her color was good. "She seems to be breathing," my neighbor said. "Not only that," he went on, "we are all of us in this room breathing. Just how you want a story to end." And yet, he added, "we may never know whether the story was intended to be a cautionary tale or perhaps a love story, since it has been interrupted. So we cannot be certain we have as yet experienced the end. But who does?" he said. "Who does?" We stayed like this a long time, stranded. I thought to myself, like ships paralyzed by bad weather. My neighbor had withdrawn into himself. Something, I felt, existed between us. Nothing so final as a baby, but real, nevertheless. Meanwhile, no one spoke. No one rushed to get help or knelt beside the prone woman. The sun was going down. Long shadows of the elms spread like dark lakes over the grass. Finally, my neighbor raised his head. "Clearly," he said, "someone must finish this story," which was, I believe, to have been a love story, such as silly women tell, meaning very long, filled with tangents and distractions meant to disguise the fundamental tedium of its simplicity. "But as," he said, "we have changed riders, we may as well change horses at the same time. Now that the tale is mine, I prefer that it be a meditation on existence." The room grew very still. "I know what you think," he said. "We all despise stories that seem dry and interminable. But mine will be a true love story. If by love we mean the way we loved when we were young, as though there were no time at all." Three. Soon night fell. Automatically, the lights came on. On the floor, the woman moved. Someone had covered her with a blanket, which she thrust aside. "Is it morning?" she said. She had propped herself up somehow so she could see the door. "There was a bird," she said. "Someone is supposed to kiss it." "Perhaps it has been kissed already," my neighbor said. "Oh, no," she said. "Once it is kissed, it becomes a human being, so it cannot fly. It can only sit and stand and lie down." "And kiss," my neighbor waggishly added. "Not any more," she said. "There was just the one time to break the spell that had frozen its heart. That was a bad trade," she said. "The wings for the kiss." She gazed at us like a figure on top of a mountain looking down, though we were the ones looking down, in actual fact. "Obviously, my mind is not what it was," she said. "Most of my facts have disappeared, but certain underlying principles have been, in consequence, exposed with surprising clarity. The Chinese were right," she said, "to revere the old. Look at us," she said. "We are all of us in this room still waiting to be transformed. This is why we search for love. We search for it all our lives, even after we find it.
Autumn. The part of life devoted to contemplation was at odds with the part committed to action. Fall was approaching, but I remember it was always approaching once school ended. Life, my sister said, is like a torch passed now from the body to the mind, sadly. She went on, the mind is not there to receive it. The sun was setting. Ah, the torch, she said. It has gone out, I believe. Our best hope is that it's flickering. Fort da, like little Ernest throwing his toy over the side of the crib and then pulling it back. It's too bad, she said, there are no children here. We could learn from them, as Freud did. We would sometimes sit on benches outside the dining room, the smell of leaves burning. Old people and fire, she said, not a good thing. They burn their houses down. How heavy my mind is, filled with the past. Is there enough room for the world to penetrate? It must go somewhere. It cannot simply sit on the surface. Stars gleaming over the water, the leaves piled, waiting to be lit. Insight, my sister said. Now it is here, but hard to see in the darkness. You must find your footing before you put your weight on it. Second win. I think this is my second win, my sister said. Very like the first, but that ended, I remember. Oh, what a wind that was. So powerful, the leaves fell off the trees. I don't think so, I said. Well, they were on the ground, my sister said. Remember running around the park in Cedarhurst, jumping on the pines and the piles, destroying them? You never jumped, my mother said. You were good girls. You stayed where I put you. Not in our heads, my sister said. I put my arms around her. What a brave sister you are, I said. A sentence. Everything has ended, I said. What makes you say so, my sister asked. Because, I said, if it has not ended, it will end soon, which comes to the same thing. And if that is the case, there is no point in beginning so much as a sentence. But it is not the same, my sister said, this ending soon. There is a question left. It is a foolish question, I answered. A children's story. Tired of rural life, the king and queen returned to the city. All the little princesses rattling in the back of the car, singing the song of being. I am, you are, he, she, it is. But there will be no conjugation in the car. Oh, no. Who can speak of the future? Nobody knows anything about the future. Even the planets do not know. But the princesses will have to live in it. What a sad day the day has become. Outside the car, the cows and pastures are drifting away. They look calm, but calm is not the truth. Despair is the truth. This is what mother and father know. All hope is lost. We must return to where it was lost if we want to find it again. A memory. A sickness came over me which origins were never determined. though it became more and more difficult to sustain the pretense of normalcy, of good health, or joy in existence. Gradually, I wanted only to be with those like myself. I sought them out as best I could, which was no easy matter since they were all disguised or in hiding. But eventually, I did find some companions, and in that period, I would sometimes walk with one or another by the side of the river, speaking again with a frankness I had nearly forgotten. And yet, more often we were silent, preferring the river over anything we could say. On either bank, the tall marsh grass blew calmly, continuously in the autumn wind. And it seemed to me, I remembered this place from my childhood, though there was no river in my childhood, only houses and lawns. So perhaps I was going back to that time before my childhood, to oblivion. Maybe it was that river I remembered. This is from The Triumph of Achilles. Baskets. It is a good thing. In the marketplace, the old woman trying to decide among the lettuces, impartial, weighing the heads, examining the outer leaves, even sniffing them to catch a scent of earth, of which on one head some trace remains, not the substance, but the residue. So she prefers it to the other. More estranged heads, it being the freshest. Nodding briskly at the vendor's wife, she makes the preference known. An old woman, yet vigorous in judgment. The circle of the world. In its midst, a dog sits at the edge of the fountain, the children playing there, coming and going from the village, pause to greet him. The impulsive losing interest in play in the little village of sticks, adorned with blue fragments of pottery. They squat beside the dog who stretches in the hot dust. Arrows of sunlight dance around him. Now in the field beyond, some great event is ending. In twos and threes, boldly swinging their shirts, the athletes stroll away, scattering red and blue and dazzling purple over the plain ground, over the trivial surface. Lord, who gave me my solitude, I watch the sun descending. In the marketplace, the stalls empty, the remaining children bicker at the fountain. But even at night, when it can't be seen, the flame of the sun still heats the pavements. That's why on earth so much life sprung up, because the sun maintains steady warmth at its periphery. Does this suggest your meaning that the game resumes in the dust beneath the infant god of the fountain? There is nothing fixed. There is no assurance of death. I take my basket to the brazen market, to the gathering place. I ask you, how much beauty can a person bear? It is heavier than ugliness. Even the burden of emptiness is nothing beside it. Crates of eggs, papayas, sacks of yellow lemons. I am not a strong woman. It is easy to want so much, to walk with such a heavy basket, either bent reed or willow. The embrace. She taught him the gods. Was it teaching? He went on hating them, but in the long evenings of obsessive talk as he listened, they became real. Not that they changed, they never seemed innately human. In the firelight, he watched her face. but she would not be touched. She had rejected the original need. Then in the darkness, he would lead her back above the trees. The city rose in a kind of splendor as all that is wild comes to the surface.
Marathon, last letter. Weeping, standing still, then going out again into the garden. In the field, white heads of dandelions making rows of saints, now bending, now stiff with awe, and at the edge, a hare, his eyes fixed, terrified, silence, herds of bells. Without thinking, I knelt in the grass like someone meaning to pray. When I tried to stand again, I couldn't move. My legs were entirely, utterly rigid. Does grief change you like that? Through the birches, I could see the pond. The sun was cutting small white holes in the water. I got up finally. I walked down to the pond. I stood there brushing the grass from my skirt, watching myself like a girl after her first lover, turning slowly in the bathroom mirror, naked, looking for a sign. But nakedness in women is always a pose. I was not transfigured. I would never be free. Song of the River. Once we were happy. We had no memories. For all the repetition, nothing happened twice. We were always walking parallel to a river with no sense of progression, though the trees across from us were sometimes birch, sometimes cypress. The sky was blue, a matrix of blue glass. While in the river, things were going by. A few leaves, a child's boat painted red and white, its sails still stained by the water. As we passed, on the surface we could see ourselves. We seemed to drift, to part, together, as the river linked us forever. Though up ahead, we were other couples choosing souvenirs. The encounter. You came to the side of the bed and sat staring at me. Then you kissed me. I felt hot wax on my forehead. I wanted it to leave a mark. That's how I knew I loved you. But I wanted it to be burned, stamped, to have something in the end. I drew the gown over my head. A red flush covered my face and shoulders. It will run its course, the course of fire, setting a gold, cold coin on the forehead between the eyes. You lay beside me. Your hand moved over my face as though you had felt it also. You must have known then how I wanted you. We will always know that, you and I. The proof will be in my body. Song of Obstacles. When my lover touches me, what I feel in my body is like the first movement of a glacier over the earth as the ice shifts, dislodging great boulders, hills of solid rock. So in the forests, the uprooted trees become a sea of disconnected limbs. And where there are cities, these dissolve too. The sighing gardens all the young girls eating chocolates in the courtyard, slowly scattering the colored foil. Then, where the city was, the ore, the unearthed mysteries. So I see that ice is more powerful than rock, than mere resistance. Then for us, in its path, time doesn't pass, not even an hour. Night song. Look up into the light of the lantern. Don't you see? The calm of darkness is the horror of heaven. We've been apart too long, too painfully separated. How can you bear to dream, to give up watching? I think you must be dreaming. Your face is full of mild expectancy. I need to wake you to remind you that there isn't a future. That's why we're free. And now some weakness in me has been cured forever. So I'm not compelled to close my eyes, to go back, to rectify. The beach is still. The sea cleansed of its superfluous life, opaque, rock-like, in mounds and vegetal clusters, seabirds sleep on the jetty, terns, assassins. You're tired. I can see that. We're both tired. We have acted the great drama. Even our hands are cold, that were like kindling. Our clothes are scattered on the sand. Strangely enough, they never turn to ashes. I have to tell you what I've learned, that I know now what happens to the dreamers. They don't feel it when they change. One day they wake, they dress, they are old. Tonight, I'm not afraid. I feel the revolutions. How can you want to sleep when passion gives you that peace? You're like me tonight, one of the lucky ones. You'll get what you want. You'll get your oblivion. The beginning. I had come to a strange city without belongings. In the dream, it was your city. I was looking for you. Then I was lost on a dark street lined with fruit stands. There was only one fruit, blood oranges. The markets made displays of them, beautiful displays. How else could they compete? And each arrangement had its center, one fruit cut open. When I was on a boulevard in brilliant sunlight, I was running. It was easy to run since I had nothing. In the distance, I could see your house. A woman knelt in the yard. There were roses everywhere. In waves, they climbed the high trellis. Then what began as love for you became a hunger for structure. I could hear the woman call to me in common kindness, knowing I wouldn't ask for you anymore. So it was settled. I could have a childhood there, which came to mean being always alone. The first goodbye. You can join the others now. Body that wouldn't let my body rest. Go back to the world, to avenues, the ordered depths of the parks, like great terminals that never darken. A stranger's waiting for you in 100 rooms. Go back to them, to increment and limitation. Near the centered rose, you watch her peel an orange, so the dyed rind falls in petals on her plate. This is mastery, whose active mode is dissection. The enforced light shines on the blade. Sooner or later, you will begin to dream of me. I don't envy you those dreams. I can imagine how my face looks, burning like that, afflicted with desire, lowered face of your invention. How the mouth betrays the isolated greed of the lover as it magnifies and then destroys. I don't envy you that visitation. And the women lying there, who wouldn't pity them? The way they turn to you, the way they struggle to be visible. They make a place for you in bed, a white excavation. Then the sacrament, your bodies pieced together, churning, churning, till the heat leaves them entirely. Sooner or later, you will call my name. Cry of loss, mistaken cry of recognition, of arrested need for someone who exists in memory. No voice carries that to the kingdom. Song of the invisible boundaries. Last night, I dreamed we were in Venice. Today, we are in Venice. Now lying here, I think there are no boundaries to my dreams, nothing we won't share. So there is nothing to describe. We're interchangeable with anyone. Enjoy, change to a mute couple. Then why did we worship clarity? To speak in the end only each other's names. To speak as now, not even the whole words, only vowels. Finally, this is what we craved, this lying in the bright light without distinction. We who would leave behind exact records. I was not marathon. I was not meant to hear the two of them talking, but I could feel the light of the torch stop trembling, as though it had been set on the table. I was not to hear the one say to the other how best to arouse me, with what words, what gestures, nor to hear the description of my body, how it responded, what it would not do. My back was turned. I studied the voices, soon distinguishing the first, which was deeper, closer from that of the replacement. For all I know, this happens every night. Somebody waking me, then the first teaching the second. What happens afterward occurs far from the world, at a depth where only the dream matters and the bond with one's soul is meaningless. You throw it away. Summer. Remember the days of our first happiness, how strong we were, how dazed by passion, lying all night, then all night in the narrow bed, sleeping there, eating there too. It was summer. It seemed everything had ripened at once. And so hot, we lay completely uncovered. Sometimes the wind rose, a willow brushed the window, but we were lost in a way. Didn't you feel that? The bed was like a raft. I felt us drifting far from our natures toward a place where we discover nothing. First the sun, then the moon, in fragments shone through the willow, things anyone could see. Then the circles closed. Slowly the nights grew cool. The pendant leaves of the willow yellowed and fell, and in each of us began a deep isolation. Though we never spoke of this, of the absence of regret. We were the artists again, my husband. We could resume the journey. The reproach. You have betrayed me, Eros. You have sent me my true love. On a high hill you made his clear gaze. My heart was not so hard as your arrow. What is a poet without dreams? I lie awake, I feel actual flesh upon me, meaning to silence me. Outside in the blackness over the olive trees, a few stars. I think this is bitter insult, that I prefer to walk the coiled paths of the garden, to walk beside the river, glittering with drops of mercury. I like to lie in the wet grass beside the river, running away, Eros, not openly with other men, but discreetly, coldly. All of my life, I have worshipped the wrong gods. When I watch the trees on the other side, the arrow in my heart is like one of them, swaying and quivering. Adult grief. Because you were foolish enough to love one place, now you are homeless, an orphan, in a succession of shelters. You did not prepare yourself sufficiently. Before your eyes, two people were becoming old. I could have told you 2 deaths were coming. There has never been a parent kept alive by a child's love. Now, of course, it's too late. You are trapped in the romance of fidelity. You kept going back, clinging to 2 people you hardly recognized after what they'd endured. If once you could have saved yourself, now that time's passed. You were obstinate, pathetically blind to change. Now you have nothing. For you, home is a cemetery. I've seen you press your face against the granite markers. You are the lichen trying to grow there. but you will not grow. You will not let yourself obliterate anything.
Legend. My father's father came to New York from Dulia. One misfortune followed another. In Hungary, a scholar, a man of property, then failure, an immigrant, rolling cigars in a cold basement. He was like Joseph in Egypt. At night, he walked the city, spray of the harbor to tears on his face, tears of grief for Dulia, 40 houses, few cows grazing the rich meadows. Though the great soul is said to be a star, a beacon, what it resembles better is a diamond. In the whole world, there is nothing hard enough to change it. Unfortunate being, have you ceased to feel the grandeur of the world that like a heavy weight shaped the soul of my grandfather? From the factory, like sad birds, his dreams flew to Dulia, grasping in their beaks, as from moist earth in which a man could see the shape of his own footprints. Scattered images, loose bits of the village. And as he packed the leaves, so within his soul, the weight compressed scrapes of Dulia into principles, abstractions worthy of the challenge of bondage. In such a world, to scorn privilege, to love reason and justice, always to speak truth, which has been the salvation of our people, since to speak the truth gives the illusion of freedom. Horse. What does the horse give you that I cannot give you? I watch you when you are alone, when you hide into the field beyond the dairy, your hands buried in the mare's dark mane. Then I know what lies behind your silence. Scorn, hatred of me, of marriage. Still, you want me to touch you. You cry out as brides cry, but when I look you in the eye, there are no children in your body. Then what is there? Nothing, I think. Only haste to die before I die. In a dream, I watched you ride the horse over the dry fields and then dismount. You two walked together in the dark. You had no shadows, but I felt them coming toward me. Since at night they go anywhere, they are their own masters. Look at me. You think I don't understand? What is the animal, if not passage out of this life?
Thank you, Kay, and thank you, Corinne and Toni, for such a wonderful reading. And we have a few minutes left. I would just like to offer a couple of observations. Louise Glück sees so much, not only the present, but the past and the sense of time. And she does it in a conversational way. And it seems to me that love and time are a couple of her themes. What would you like to each say in a 30 or 40 seconds, 45 seconds? Let's just start with Corinne and go to Kay and then Toni.
I found it interesting reading her in that oftentimes I would think she was telling a real story and I would get involved like in a short story. But of course, as you read the poem again, the story was different. And each time you read it, the story is different because really, like there is no story, there's no plot. This is a poem. And each time you read it, it depends on where you are. the words are the same on the paper and as she put them, but what happens in your head when you read her poetry, and I guess poetry, maybe I've kind of think it works over other poems as well. It's more or less where you are and what you bring to it that makes the difference in what they're offering.
Kay?
Well, that's very interesting, Corinne. I also thought that many of your poems did seem like a story, and I was jealous. And I wanted to have read those because I had a harder time with mine. But as with the other poets, I see that reading it over and over again suddenly makes it come alive, and you realize what you're saying and what the poet is saying. I find her very sensual, and she writes a lot about sex underneath her poems, I think. Very interesting.
Toni?
I love it. I love her work.
Well, for me, she's had it pretty well laid out. Of course, I researched some of it, and she was married to someone, and that's why I asked you one time, Harry, did she file for divorce or did he? Because she's absolutely was madly in love with this fellow. And she just, I think something that was in one of Corinne's poems, always searching for love even after we found it. I think she realized that whether she ended it or he did, she was still struck by the Eris arrow. She was still wondering, maybe that's kind of what I got from reading it. Did she make the right decision or whatever? She still had a passion for him, or wondering if he did for her or whatever. That's just kind of what I got.
Thank you all.
He was just stung.
Thank you all. It's 2:00. It's time to move on to the council meeting. Jennifer, thank you very much once again. And I always appreciate how wonderful all of you ladies read. So thank you.